Personal skills are one of my favorite mechanics in Fire Emblem. They offer a way for a character to stand out in their own unique way. It is in my opinion one of the best things about Fates and Tree Houses. And when one of the older Fire Emblem titles eventually gets remade again, it would be pretty interesting if some of the old characters we all know and love would come with personal skills of their own. So in this video we're going to have a bit of fun and fool around with the idea of designing personal skills for characters from Fire Emblem 7, The Blazing Sword. And hey, if this video ends up doing well, maybe I'll make a follow-up video where I take some characters from the other games as well. But for now, let's stick with Fire Emblem 7 as it has a very colorful and vibrant cast that fits a video such as this. When designing personal skills for these characters, I have a few goals in mind. First and foremost, the skill must suit their personality and backstory. It must have a cool sounding name, and it must make sense from a gameplay perspective. I also want it to be somewhat balanced and not completely broken. Hopefully I am able to pull off all these requirements. So without further ado, let's begin with the Lords and their personal skills. Lyn, Lady of the Plains. Whenever Lyn is fighting on grassy terrain, she gets 10% extra crit and avoid. This one was an easy one. I figured that something akin to Outdoor Fighter would always fit Lyn's personality well, but I wanted it to be more based on her native environment, hence why I picked grass. This is obviously a pretty strong skill, as there's a lot of grass tiles in Fire Emblem 7, but being a Lord and arguably the weakest of the three, I think it's fair to give Lyn a strong personal skill to compensate. I also chose one that boosts both her crit and avoid, specifically because I think Lyn's critical animations are kick-ass, and evading attacks is her primary method of staying alive. So I think it fits her both in regards to flavor and game balance. Eliwood, Noble Duelists. Whenever Eliwood is fighting a target without anyone else being adjacent to him, he gets 10% extra hit and avoid. This skill is inspired by a conversation Eliwood has with Hector, where he talks about how much he dislikes war. He mentions that as long as he focuses on the opponent in front of him, he's fine, but that when he imagines huge battlefields with tons of people and innocent civilians getting pulled into it, he just gets lost. This skill represents how adept Eliwood is at staying focused on a single enemy, but as soon as he gets surrounded, whether by allies or by enemies, he loses his focus, and no longer benefits from the skill. Hector, Recklessness. Whenever Hector initiates battle, he gains 15% extra crit, but also 10% less avoid. Hector's trademark strategy is charging into battle with little regard for his own safety, relying on his armor to keep him alive. Having a skill that increases his offense at the cost of his avoid just made sense to me. I mean, the dude literally leaps through the air with his axe. There's no way he's able to dodge all that well while doing it. The bonus would have to be substantial, since it's only active on player face and comes with a penalty to boot, but I didn't want to go too overboard either, so I landed on 15%, but honestly, out of all the skills, this was the one I was most unsure about in regards to numbers. So, with the Lords out of the way, let's continue with the rest of the casts, starting with Sain and his personal skill, Knight Gallant. Whenever Saint is adjacent to a female unit, he deals 3 extra damage. I don't think I need to explain this one. Having a skill that relies on nearby females is always something I knew Sain would have, and just a skill that straight up lets him deal more damage also made a lot of sense to me. And of course, with Sain having this skill, it only felt natural to do Kent with Knight Champion. Whenever Kent is adjacent to a female unit, he takes 3 less damage. It's just a defensive variant of Sain's skill, but I also think it fits Kent's personality. If he has a lady to protect, he will endure much more than usual. Bartre, Bravery. For each enemy within 3 tiles of Bartre, he deals 1 extra damage. Bartre is all about throwing himself into huge packs of enemies, and this skill is my attempt to represent that fighting style. The more enemies there are around Bartre, the more carnage he causes, and with Bartre, it had to be a skill that was all about just doing more damage, and fits his style. The name Bravery is a spin on the title he gives himself, Bartre the Brave. Florina, Timid. Florina gains a 10% bonus to her avoid, but this bonus is lost if she is adjacent to an allied male unit. Florina's fear of men is very ingrained into her character, so it made sense for me to have a skill that works around that. The extra avoid she gets from her personal skill represents her cautious nature, and the fact that she loses this bonus is meant to represent her freaking out that a man is in her vicinity. I specifically chose the skill only to be removed by male allies, as making it male enemies would make it absolutely worthless. At the end of the day, we do have to take balance into account. Canas, Bookworm. If Canas has 3 or more tomes in his inventory, he gains 30% extra experience in combat, but he also suffers minus 10% of void. Canas is the kind of person that will pull out a book and start reading on the battlefield, especially if he has a lot of books on hand, which obviously makes him more distracted and thus more prone to getting hit, hence why I included the 10% penalty to avoid. However, the player has a choice to disable this skill by simply not equipping Canas with more than 2 tomes. The extra experience this skill gives him is supposed to reflect Canas learning and using the knowledge he obtains to improve his skills. Raven, Vindictive. If an enemy attacks and deals damage to Raven, Raven gets a 30% crit bonus on his next counterattack. This skill is quite simple. Raven's entire personality is about being driven by vengeance. You hurt Raven, chances are Raven's gonna hurt you back. And I think this skill really represents that. The reason why I had to go with such a huge bonus is because the criteria of getting hit and taking damage would only apply on enemy phase, and it would also be a bit tricky to activate reliably, thus the bonus would need to be higher than regular. Hawkeye, Savage Howl. In one of Penn's support conversations with Hawkeye, we see him howling like a mad animal to intimidate his opponents in battle, and this combined with Hawkeye's massive size and fearsome appearance makes it easy to imagine enemies being intimidated as hell whenever they are near him. So a skill that reflects this made sense to me, and I figured it would have to be a penalty that affects their ability to fight and deal damage, hence why I chose it to debuff hit and crits. Louise, Lethal Beauty. All enemies within 3 tiles of Louise suffers minus 10% avoid and minus 10% crit avoid. When fighting Louise, I imagine enemies would make 1 out of 2 mistakes. They would either underestimate her because she looks so kind and sweet, and therefore would lower their guard around her, or they would be wildly captivated by her looks and also lower their guard around her. And maybe I'm just projecting myself onto the enemies here. Either way, I think a skill that debuffs nearby enemies fits Louise's style, as it effectively allows her to support nearby allies in addition to boosting her own damage. The skill name Lethal Beauty is literally just her description in the game. I figured it was a good name for a skill. Nino, Illiterate Prodigy. Nino gets double experience from combat, but her weapon ranks take twice as long to improve. Nino joins terribly late and terribly underleveled, so a personal skill that increased her experience gains always made sense to me, so literally Paragon, but I wanted it to have a drawback, as Nino is actually illiterate in the story, so it would make sense that she would be a lot slower to pick up on the more advanced magics, as not being able to read and having to memorize everything in your head is undoubtedly a big handicap, but one that she is able to overcome with her natural talent for magic. Karel, Sword Demon. Whenever Karel is fighting a promoted enemy wielding a sword, he gains 30% extra crits. Karel lives to fight strong swordsmen. It is literally his entire reason for existing. When he does encounter a worthy opponent, he is possessed by a vicious bloodlusts, and I wanted to represent this in the game in a way that makes sense. We know from his personality that Karel has little interest in weaklings, so having this bonus activate against unpromoted units simply wouldn't make sense. Karel simply doesn't get excited by that, as we can see in his support conversations with Guy. When fighting promoted units wielding swords, however, Karel's battle lust escalates, and since this skill will activate rather rarely, I felt I could afford to give it the huge 30% bonus to represent Karel's vicious nature. Jaffar, Angel of Death. Whenever Jaffar kills an enemy, he gains a +4 bonus to his strength, skill, and speed until the start of his next turn. I know this is literally just a copy of Shamir's skill from Tree Houses, but it was just so perfect for him. With Jaffar, I knew that whatever personal skill he had needed to be related to killing in some way, and it just made sense that when he kills, he gets stronger, as he has literally been an instrument of death all his life. A +4 bonus to 3 stats may sound a bit broken, but keep in mind that Jaffar will seldom see much enemy face action as he is an assassin locked to swords, unless a potential FE7 remake includes more available ranged swords or reclassing. In that case, this skill would need a big nerf. Linus, Mad Dog. Linus, as well as all his allies on the battlefield, deal 3 extra damage, but also gets minus 10% avoid and crit avoid. You thought playable characters were the only ones to get personal skills? Well, think again. What I love so much about these skills is that you can also give them to some of the villains to emphasize their personalities. This skill reflects Linus and his crazy, reckless nature. You don't get nicknamed the Mad Dog for nothing. Linus's personal skill doesn't just affect him, it affects the entire battlefield, making every enemy easier to hit and crit, but also making them much more dangerous, as it is seen that Linus's men also fights like mad dogs whenever their commander is on the field. Denning, Messenger. This unit is carrying a message from Lord Nurgle. The skill obviously wouldn't do anything, but I would still put it in the game all the same. Alright, I could probably keep doing this all day, making up skills for every single playable and enemy character in Fire Emblem 7, but now I would like to hear your ideas. What kind of personal skills would you like to make for the rest of the Fire Emblem 7 casts? I would love to hear your answer in the comment section below. And if you want to see another video like this for another Fire Emblem game, make sure you thumb up this one and subscribe for more content. My name is Finn Mengs, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!